Should we do a review? Previous class, I don't know. Let's just do a review because it's always nice to do a review. Okay, so what all did we go through in the previous class? We talked about mostly.
Mass deficit.
Oh yeah, yeah. We started talking about what happened inside the nucleus. So how essentially the nucleus is bound by, or the binding energy of the nucleus is, that is given by the mass deficit. If you multiply the mass deficit by c square, you get binding energy, right? What else did we talk about?
Different types of decays.
Yes, we talked about decays. There was alpha decay, beta decay, and gamma decay. Alpha decay was because of the alpha particle, which is the helium nucleus. So it's helium 24. The beta decay was, there are three kinds of beta decay, right? There was beta plus, beta minus, and there was electron capture. Electron capture. Beta plus was when a positron was released. Beta minus is when an electron is released. And electron capture is, as the term suggests, when an electron is captured. So when is a positron released? When a proton is essentially breaking down, or let's just call it hydrogen nucleus. It's the same thing as an atom, as a proton, right? The hydrogen nucleus. So if this breaks down into its constituent neutron, and the charge is comes out in form of a positron and a neutrino. This is called a beta plus decay. In a beta minus decay, an electron comes out. So for an electron to come out, you need to decay a neutron, and since there's a negative charge that is coming out, for to balance the charge, there should be a positive charge that comes out also. So that positive charge is just the proton, and there's an anti-neutrino that comes out as well. We talked about the whole neutrino thing and how this works because of energy conservation and spin conservation, and actually momentum conservation as well is a problem there. And then was the last thing was electron capture, when we realized that the proton inside the nucleus captures an electron. So a positive charge and a negative charge essentially combine to form a neutral charge. So what will the neutral charge be? It will just be the neutron and plus some kind of a neutrino. Lovely. What else did we talk about? Oh, there was gamma.
Uh,
Yes.
Nuclear energy levels.
Yes. So for the gamma decay, we need to talk about the nuclear energy levels. And we realize that whenever alpha and beta decay happen, the product that forms, these products that there are, they are formed in unstable slash metastable state. An unstable state is a state which is absolutely unstable, so a particle can never stay there. A metastable state is essentially a state which is stable, but stable for some time. So essentially a particle can come here. So for example, let's call this third state here a metastable state. We denote it by a star. um, Whatever nucleus is there in this metastable state will stay there for some time, until unless it decays. And then it will decay and come down, and then it will decay again and it will come down to the ground state. And this decay, essentially, this release of photon is essentially the release of these gamma particles, because gamma is essentially the photon. So that is essentially what we talked about. Is there something else that I'm missing?
No, sir.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. That's amazing. So now let's just move on to some questions. Hmm. Okay, there are two isobars that are given. There are two isobars, not ibars, but isobars. Ibar would be a apple bar. It would be a really, really expensive one. Isobars, you have copper 64 with the atomic mass or mass number, and you have 29 as the atomic number, and zinc, which is 30 atomic number and 64 mass number, is the isotope 64 that we're using, zinc here. And we have their masses to be, the mass for copper is given to be 63.9298 atomic mass unit, or just U. So Sometimes they just write U, sometimes they write A and U, both mean exactly the same thing. And the mass of the zinc is also given to you. It's given to be 63.9292 U. U meaning atomic mass unit, respectively. What can be concluded from the data? There are four options I'm giving to you. Just tell me which of these options might be correct. Multiple options might also be correct. It's not just that uh, one of the options might be correct. Multiple options might also be correct. So the first option is both. The isobars are stable. Second, zinc 64 is radioactive. Is radioactive, and it decays into uh, copper 29 with atomic mass 64 through beta decay, or copper 64 is radioactive. Is radioactive, decaying into zinc 64 through gamma decay, or the last option is copper 64 is radioactive. I'm just putting double commas for things to be the same in the upper line and the lower line. Okay, decaying into zinc 64 through a beta decay. So these are the four options. Any questions, any doubts, just ask me. Okay, what do you mean by no? I don't understand. No, lovely. Okay, how do you know that A and C are correct?
Mm. For first one, uh, they both are
They are
they're
isobars.
stable.
Yes, they are both isobars. When one say isobars, they mean that their atomic masses are the same. That's
Yeah,
absolutely true. But
so
are
they are
both of
stable.
them stable? That's the question. Are both of them stable? So how do you check for stability? Any idea? So just think about it. How would you know that any state is stable or not? Logically, what should be the way out?
Electrons.
No,
like whether they are balanced or not, valence shell,
see,
like
we're
they are.
right now we're not talking about electrons. Right now we're talking about inside the nucleus, right? Electrons are outside the nucleus. Our electrons are present in the atom. Now we're literally talking about what is happening inside the nucleus. So how do you know if a nucleus is stable or not? Okay, there's a standard way of knowing this, which is essentially to see. So you remember when we talked about alpha decay? You remember we had a Q in the on the right hand side. Yes, no. So
Yes,
when
sir.
we said we had an X, let's say Z and A, and this decays into a Y with Z minus 2 and A minus 4 and a helium to 4 and plus some Q. And we said if Q is positive, then it's spontaneous. And if Q is negative, it's non-spontaneous, right? As in if Q is negative, you need to provide energy. So we essentially need to check this. So we need to put copper here and then zinc here as X. So first of all, neither of them can go to each other through this process. But second of all, if you actually go ahead and put these things here, you will realize that Q will be positive. Q will be positive in the case of zinc. Actually, the Q will be positive. What would that mean? That would mean that if you have zinc, it will just disintegrate. It will just disintegrate, giving out a helium and two small, so 28 जो भी copper से पहले क्या आता है, जो भी आता है, that is what will be released with some energy. Does that make sense? So you'll
Yes,
have
sir.
to go through all this process. You'll have to go through the alpha decay. You'll have to write down the mass of this, which is given to you here. This you can use or this you can use, whichever you're using first. And then you need the mass of the other. You know the mass of helium, and then from that you will just calculate Q. If Q is positive, then it's very nice. This is unstable. If Q is negative, then it's stable. That is essentially what how you check for stability. This is this is unstable and this is stable. What about B? B is saying that zinc 64 is radioactive. Okay, that makes sense. It is saying zinc 64 sounds like something that is radioactive, and it decays into copper 6429 through beta decay. Well, zinc is 30, 64, and if it goes through a beta decay and it releases an electron, so that would mean that whatever is found here should have atomic number one more than zinc, right? Because that's how beta decays work, right? Because what you essentially have in a beta decay, you have an X, Z, A going out to a Y, Z plus 1, A plus an electron plus an anti-neutron. Yes, no, maybe. Why is this happening? This is exactly the same as writing a neutron going to a proton and an electron plus a neutron. इसमें there was a neutron which essentially went down and made a proton, and hence you have a Z plus 1 here. Z is essentially the number of protons, right? That's why you have Z plus 1 here, and you have an electron which is coming from here, and an anti-neutron that is coming from here. So this cannot be true. What about C? C says that copper decays into zinc through gamma decay. But if it were a gamma decay, then the atomic number, atomic mass has to remain the same, because gamma is only these energy levels. It's just coming down different energy levels, right? It's not changing its atomic number. It's not changing its atomic mass. The number of protons is remaining the same. The number of neutrons is remaining the same. So hence the nucleus remains the same. So this can also not be true. What about part C? So this we already wasn't true. What about part D? Well, D sounds like something that actually can happen. So let's see. Let's rub this. Let's see what is happening in D. You have copper which was 30 from what I remember, and 64, right? Did I write the same? 30, 64. Yes, 30, 64. So you had copper 30, 64, and the last part is saying that it decays into uh, zinc. Sorry, copper is 29 and zinc is 30, right? 64. Now this can happen. This is essentially a reaction just like this, because you have a Z here, which was 29, and it goes up by one, which is 30 here, plus an electron, plus an antineutrino. This can absolutely happen. So that's why only D is the right answer. Does that make sense? So you'll have to go through each and every one and check whether this works or whether this does not work.
Okay, sir.
Does it make sense? Should I go through it again?
Yes. Sir, can you?
Yes, yes, obviously I can. Say, I'll write down the question again. So what you have copper 29, 64, and you have zinc 30, 64. The masses are given. So mass of copper 2964 is given to be 63.9298 U, and mass of zinc 3064 is given to be 63.9292 U. First option, let's go one by one. Both are isobars and are stable. See, first of all, two isobars, both of them cannot be stable. By definition, they cannot be stable. Why? Why can both of them not be stable? Because see the number of neutrons and number of protons here. There are 29 protons here because Z is just the number of protons. So number of protons is 29, and the number of neutrons, let's call that N. How many would that be? That's 64 minus 29, right?
35.
35.
35.
Love. And here you have number of protons to be 30, and you have number of neutrons to be 34. Which of the two do you think will be more stable? First of all, both of them will be unstable because the differences here is 4 and the difference here is 6. But which will be more unstable? This,
I
whichever
guess
has
copper.
a bigger difference will be more unstable. Rule of thumb, okay? Remember this as a rule of thumb. Anything that has a more bigger difference between the number of protons and number of neutrons will be more unstable. Okay?
Okay,
Uh,
sir.
does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
See, because if there is a lot of if there is a lot of distance between the number of protons and the number of neutrons, what essentially happens? Your strong force, which is essentially, so for the strong force, the protons and neutrons are essentially two different particles which are holding them together. If one type of a particle is way larger, for example, if you just think about electromagnetic force, if you have more electrons than protons, then obviously the system is unstable, so it will start moving because the system has a full on charge. Similarly, if the number of neutrons is way higher than the number of protons, it's still going to be unstable. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this cannot be true. What about B part? Zinc 64 is radioactive and decays into copper 64 through beta decay. What is zinc? Zinc is 30. Zinc is 30, 64. What the option says that this goes into copper. Copper 64 to 29 through a beta decay. Now, if this were a beta decay, then you have an electron here and an anti neutrino here. But can this particular thing go on or not? Let's see if this works. How many protons are there in here? There are 30 protons. And how many neutrons are there? We already calculated. There are 34 neutrons, right? Here there are 29 protons and 36 neutrons, and here we have one electron. So see the total charge. What is the total charge here? Here there are 30 protons, so total charge inside the nucleus is 30 electron charge. Here you have 29 protons and one electron. So the positive is E plus होगा ये. So let's call it 30 plus 30 coulomb charge, and here not a coulomb but number of electrons. So इसका 30 charge होगा, इसका 28 charge होगा, right? 29 minus 1. This cannot happen. So charge cannot just disappear. Charge is always conserved. So this equation cannot work. Why? Because it violates charge conservation. Make sense? It violates charge conservation. You just count the charge on the left hand side, you count the charge on the right hand side, you say they don't match. Just a second, Giovanna is trying to join in again. Hello, I'm sorry, where did you leave?
So I went like when it was B.
B. Okay, so all I'm saying is that you have this equation, right? All you need to do is check when an equation can be valid only when you have energy conservation, you have charge conservation, you have mass conservation. So those are chemical essentially things where you have mass conservation as well. Here you don't really, you have energy conservation, mass energy equivalence. Because of that, you need to have spin conservation, and you need to have number of fermi or the number of bosons. That will come later. But abhi tak we just need energy conservation, we need spin conservation, and we need charge conservation. Let's just check for charge conservation in this equation. Okay, what is happening to the charge here? Why is this not moving? Oh, because of this. No, not because of this. Okay. Hmm. Okay, so let's again just count the charges on the right hand side and on the left hand side. What is the charge on the left hand side? 30, right? Because there are 30 protons.
Yeah,
Total
30.
charge, there are 30 protons, right? Neutrons are neutral. So उसका charge जो होगा वो खाली proton की वजह से होगा. Only the protons will have the charge, right? So you'll have 30 as the charge. On the right hand side, this has 29
29.
protons and this has one electron. So total positive charge will be 28. So this violates charge conservation, because on the left hand side the total charge was 30 and on the right hand side the total charge is 28. Charge is disappearing. That cannot happen. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Lovely. So let's move on to the next one. The C part would be is saying कि copper 64 decays into zinc 64 through gamma decay. This can also not be true. Why? Again, because of charge conservation. This is 29 and this is 30 plus gamma. That is what it's saying, right? Now, just count the number of charges on the left hand side, count the number of charges on the right hand side. On the left hand side, you have 29 protons. On the right hand side, you have 13 protons. Obviously, the charge on the right hand side is more than the charge on the left hand side. So, this is not going to work. This is false. D, coming to the last thing, you have copper 64, which is at 29 here. It says it goes to zinc 64, which is 30 here, plus an electron plus an antineutrino, which is the whole beta decay. Now, let's count the number of protons here. Well, the number of positive charge is 29 on the left hand side, and on the right hand side, you have 30 here and a minus 1 here. So, if you add these two, you will get 29 here. Well, charge is conserved on both sides. That's lovely. So, we know that copper can go through a beta decay. So, this is possible. So, that's why only D is the right answer. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Lovely. Okay, let's quickly move on to the next question. Let's write it down. If uh, stationary electron, electron annihilated gets annihilated due to uh, the associated due to the association, sorry, the association with a stationary positron. This is obviously hypothetically. Find the wavelength. Find the wavelength of the resulting radiation. Essentially, what are you saying here? You have an electron and you have a positron. So the matter and antimatter pair of electrons, and what they're saying is that they're combining, and when they combine, they essentially release energy. Obviously, they'll release energy. What will happen is that all the mass of this electron, the positron, will essentially convert it to energy, and that energy, using that energy, you need to calculate the wavelength of that light. I'll give you some options also if that's okay. It can be either H over m naught C, where m naught is the mass of the electron. So let's say m naught is mass of electron. H is obviously the Planck's constant, and C is the speed of light. What else can be? It can be either 2h over m naught C or h over m naught C, or C is h over 2 m naught C. M naught C, and D is none. Okay, go ahead.
So can you repeat the question?
The question is that if a stationary electron, so you have an electron, gets annihilated due to association with a stationary positron. So you have an electron and you have a positron. They combine. When they combine, what happens is that they annihilate each other, in the sense that neither the electron, neither the positron is left. All that is left is just energy, it's just radiation, it's just photons. So all the energy, because of energy conservation, so the reaction will look like this. The positron plus the electron gives gamma, but you'll have to realize that only this equation is not, you cannot have momentum conservation with this equation, right? Why can you not have momentum conservation with this equation? Any idea?
Because it's stationary.
Yes, absolutely. Initially, both of them were stationary, so their momentums were zero, and at the end, you have a gamma that is coming out. Gamma will have some momentum, right? Light has some momentum. We've already read about that in a couple of lectures ago. So this will have some momentum p. In order to cancel, you need another gamma, which will have the momentum minus p, so that they cancel each other out, and you can have an equation which essentially governs this. So remember, there will be two photons that are coming out. There isn't one photon that is coming out, and that will change your answer slightly.
So is it revolting?
Is it what?
Revolting radiation?
Resulting radiation. I'm so sorry. I just write it down again. See, I can write nicely also. Of the resulting radiation. Okay, thoughts, ideas, doubts.
Is it C, sir?
I don't know. I'll have to check. No. See, let's just use energy conservation, right? That's the best thing to do. Let's see what the energy on the left hand side of this equation is. Well, mass of the electron is just m naught c squared. That's energy, right? Because both of them are stationary. That's the whole energy that is associated with this. Positron, also the same energy, m naught c square. This should be equal to what is the energy of the gamma? It's just h nu. Energy is just h nu, right? And h nu is just hc by lambda, correct? So I'll just write this as hc by lambda plus an hc by lambda. So let's solve this equation. This implies you get twice on the left hand side and twice on the right hand side. So you can just cancel the two out. But I won't. I'll write everything down. M naught c square is equal to hc over lambda. This 2 cancels out, the c cancel out. So what lambda you get if you take the lambda on the other side and bring the m naught c downwards. So lambda is just h over m naught c. That's it. So the answer is C. Does this make sense? Write down the equation, write down energy conservation, and just solve it.
Okay, sir.
Make sense? Pakka. Because if
Yes,
it
sir.
doesn't make sense, I can repeat.
I got it, sir.
Uh, smart. Actually, this would take some time. Let's do this way. You have a proton. A proton is bombarded on a stationary lithium nucleus. Okay, so you have a proton which is bombarded on a stationary lithium nucleus. Lithium is what atomic number? I told you helium. So three. Mass number, well, depends on how many neutrons there are. So I'll not write it down here. Should be six, but let's see. Nucleus, full stop. As a result, as a result of the collision, two particles, two alpha particles actually, two alpha particles are produced. Okay. If the direction of motion, if the direction of motion of the alpha particle, the direction of motion of the alpha particle makes, if the direction of motion of the alpha particle makes an angle of, uh, so the angle is cos inverse 1 by 4 with respect to the initial direction of motion. The initial direction of motion. Find the kinetic energy of the striking proton. Find the kinetic energy of the striking proton given binding energies. Actually, this is 7. Given given some things. Binding energy per nucleon. Given binding energy per nucleon divided by A. I'll just write it as per nucleon. For lithium 37 is given to be 5.60 million electron volts or mega electron volts, and the binding energy per nucleon, or the other thing, which is the alpha particle, the H24 or the helium nucleus, is just not just a lot, 7.06 million electron volts or electron volts respectively. As you can assume that mass of the proton is equal to the mass of the neutron. Okay, go ahead. This will take anyone sometime. So if you have any doubts, just ask. So this is the essential diagram that you have. You have the proton, which is just the hydrogen nucleus, coming towards the lithium nucleus. The lithium nucleus is stationary, and it collides and it produces two helium nucleus. So what all do you need to find the initial kinetic energy? Well, you need energy conservation, EC. You can also use momentum conservation, but it really won't be useful. But momentum conservation, obviously, and other things if you want. Okay, thoughts, ideas, questions, conundrums, queries, something. How do you proceed with this?
Um, Equating kinetic energy and binding energy.
The kinetic energy, so it's just energy conservation, right? Let's remove all of this. Sorry. So let's see what the reaction is like. So you have the proton, which is essentially moving at some kinetic energy, has some kinetic energy. You have the lithium nucleus, which has three protons and four neutrons. So how many protons and wait, then it breaks down into two helium, helium 2 4, helium 2 4 at an angle of cos inverse 1 by 4 and cos inverse 1 by 4. Okay, so let's use energy conservation first. Energetically, initially you have, so how is the reaction? You have the proton plus the lithium 3 7 gives helium 2 4 plus helium 2 4, right? This is the reaction that is happening. What is the energy on the left hand side? Well, you have the mass energy of the proton, which is, let's just call it mp c square. Okay, so mp will be the mass of the proton or the mass of the hydrogen nucleus, same thing, multiplied by c square. That's the first term here, plus some kinetic energy. Let's call that kinetic energy capital K. Okay, so the energy of this is just mp c square plus K. Now, plus you have the rest energy of the lithium nucleus, which is given to you. It's given to be 5.6, but let's just write it as the binding energy. No, this is the binding energy per nucleus. Okay, so the total energy is of the lithium 3 7 should be equal to, this is on the left hand side. This is what is happening on the left hand side. What about the right hand side? Well, you have twice the energy of the helium, obviously 2 4, plus there is some kinetic energy that this is moving with. Let's say it was moving, both of them are moving with the same velocity. They have to be moving with the same velocity. Why do we know? Let's not say that they're moving at the same velocity. Let's say they're moving at different velocities, v1 and v2. So what's the kinetic energy for the first one? Well, that's just half m v1 square plus half m v2 square, where m, what is m? M is the mass of the helium nucleus, right? Of the helium, mass of helium. So this should be your whole energy equation, energy conservation equation, correct? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes, sir.
Lovely. Now, what about, this is one equation. Now you have one equation. How many variables do you have here? Let's count the number of variables. Well, is MP a variable? No. MP is the mass of a proton. It's given. It's a constant. C is also a constant. Pies. I don't know who bloody hell pies is. What about the kinetic energy? Kinetic energy is something you don't know and is actually asked for. So this is your first variable. What about the energy of lithium? Well, you're given the binding energy per nucleon for lithium. So if you just multiplied the binding energy per nucleon by the total number of nucleons, which is 7 in this case, we'll get the total binding energy, right? So that is essentially something that we can figure out. So that's not a variable. Similarly, the energy of the helium can also be figured out. It's not a variable. The mass of helium is also not a variable, but the velocities v1 and v2, they are variables. So this is your second variable and this is your third variable. So you have 3 total variables, correct? How
Yes,
many
sir.
equations do you have? You have only one equation, right? To solve for 3 variables, you need 3 equations, right? Where do you get the remaining 2 equations? Well, you get the remaining 2 equations from momentum conservation, right? Momentum conservation along the x-axis and momentum conservation along the y-axis. That will tell you everything that you need to know. So let's do that. let's apply momentum conservation first along the y-axis because it's just simpler. Along the y-axis, initially there is zero momentum, right? So the total momentum along the y-axis is zero, as the hydrogen nucleus or the proton, same thing, is moving along the x-axis. So along the y-axis, the momentum is zero, and lithium is also stationary. So again, the momentum is zero. So the total momentum along the y-axis is zero. But what about the RHS? What about the resultant? Well, you have, let's say the momentum is m mass of the helium multiplied by v1. So that will be the mass, that will be a momentum, but that will be momentum in this direction. So let's say this angle is some theta, which is this. So it will be m v1 sine theta, right? Because it's essentially the component in this direction and the component in this direction, right? Minus mass of helium v2 sine theta again. So the sine theta cancels out, the mass of helium cancels out, and what will remain is V1 is equal to V2. As I said initially, V1 will be equal to V2, and this has proved to us that V1 will be equal to V2. Let's call this sum equal to some V. So let's remove this V1 and V2 and say that both of them are some V because they are going to be equal. Make sense? Yes. That is
Yes, sir.
essentially how you're proceeding. This is equal to. But what about the x-axis? Okay, let's clear everything. Let's draw it again. You have theta, theta. Let's see what happens along the x-axis. Momentum. What is the momentum of the hydrogen along the x-axis initially? Well, it's just the mass of the hydrogen, which is the mass of the proton, multiplied by c square. No, that's the rest energy. What about the momentum? Multiplied by the initial velocity. Well, kinetic energy you can say is half mpv square, right? V initial square. Let's call it Vi. Let's say it's moving at some Vi, and the kinetic energy associated with this is half mpvi square. So this is the initial momentum. This will be the total momentum, right? Because the lithium is not moving. Lithium is stationary, so it won't have any momentum. Now, what about the hydrogen? What about the helium? Or what about the right hand side? Well, you have mass of the helium times the velocity, which is going to be v1, but v1 and v2 are the same, and I called that v. So it's just m mass of helium times v times cos theta, right? Because it's essentially component in the along the x-axis, plus because this will also have a component along the positive x direction, it will be exactly the same thing. Mass of helium v times cos theta. So this is 2 mass of helium times v cos theta on the right hand side, and you have mass of the proton times vi on the left hand side. So you have mass of the proton, Vi is equal to mass of the helium twice the mass of the helium, V cos theta. Now, you're given theta. Theta is given to be cos inverse 1 by 4, right? So cos theta is just 1 by 4, correct? So let's just put this value here. So this is 1 by 4 cos theta. So MP Vi is just equal to m mass of helium V time divided by 2. So this implies your your volume, volume क्यों बोल रहा भाई मैं? Your velocity of the helium is just so velocity of the helium would just be twice of mass of proton Vi divided by mass of helium, correct? We'll use this as equation 1. Let's rub the remaining. So the momentums are done. So now you have how many equations and how many variables? You have 3 equations and 3 variables. One variable you already removed, which was variable V2 in the kinetic energy equation. Kinetic energy equation, let's write that down again. You have mp(c) squared plus the binding energy of the lithium 37 plus kinetic energy, which is just half mvi squared, which is equal to twice the binding energy, the total energy of the helium, because there are two heliums that are coming out, plus twice the kinetic energy of those. So half m helium times v squared, right? So the two cancels out. Okay, so let's just put the value of v from the equation 1 inside here. What you get? You get mpc squared plus the energy of lithium 37 plus half mvi squared is equal to, what is this m? This is mass of the proton, right? This is mp. Half mp vi squared times 2 energy is equal to 2 times the energy of the helium 24 plus mass of the helium, and since we're putting in the velocity, so you get 2 times mp vi divided by mass of helium. So just substituting it up here, we get this. The mass of the helium cancels out, yes, and we can just substitute all the values in and just calculate. So please do that. So all the values are given to you. This is the energy. So take the mass of the proton, it's there in your notes, multiply it by c square. Don't really need to do that, you've already done that, and you already know how to convert mass of proton into directly into uh, mega electron volts. How do you do that? U to mega electron volts is just a multiplication by 931.5, right? So one atomic mass unit is just equal to 931.5 mega electron volts. So mass of the proton is approximately just one. So we can just substitute everything. You get 931.5 approximately here. How will you get the energy of the lithium? Well, you're given the energy per unit nucleon. So energy by A is given to be, for the lithium is given in the question to be 5.6, and A is just 7. So the total energy will just be 5.6 into 7. That is essentially what you'll put here in mega electron volts. Obviously, this will be in mega electron volts, and this is what you need to find out. This is also given to you. So how many total nucleons are there? So there's a 2 outside. Let's not consider the 2. Let's only think about what is inside. We'll multiply by the 2 later. What is left here? Again, the binding mass E by A is just equal to 7.06, I'm sorry, mega electron volt, and A is just given to you to be 4. So the total binding energy should be 7.06 into 4 mega electron volt. Substitute that in here, multiply that by 2, and the remaining twice of mpbi vi squared. Oh, bloody hell. Shit. There's a square here. All of this is correct. All of this is correct. This is fine. But I'll still. There's a whole square here, right? Why is there a square here? I'll just show you. This V, there was a V square here, right? You need to, when you substitute it, there's going to be a square here as well. So you'll have. So what will you have here? Grab this again. This won't really cancel out. I need to remove this also. You'll have mass of helium and mass of helium, right? So there's a mass of helium squared. So there's only mass of helium. So only one will cancel out. So what you will get as a result of this whole thing will be a 4 multiplied by mp over mhe multiplied by mp into vi squared, right? And I can multiply by half and then 8 here. So this whole thing will just be the kinetic energy. So we can call it K, you can call this K. So now you have one equation and one variable, just substitute everything and solve. Please, and tell me the answer. Jabana, is this calculation clear? Jabana, can you do this calculation on your own? That's my question.
Yes, sir, I can. I can.
Pakka?
Yes, sir.
Because there's a lot of calculation, but it's all logical, right? It's just energy conservation. It might look like a lot, but if you just remember the basic, what is the basic? It's just energy conservation and momentum conservation. That is all you're doing. You do first you do energy conservation, then you just count how many variables you have and how many equations you have. Then you write down the remaining equations, substitute things, and just calculate the value of it. That is it. The values might be complicated, the equation might be complicated, but the thoughts behind it are very simple. So go ahead and tell me what the answer is. So, what is the answer? Are you close?
Uh, so for last term, like, how do we do that?
See, mass of proton, it's just 8 times. This whole thing just becomes k, right? ये तो हमको निकालना ही है. So this is also k, and this is also k. So this you can take this term on the right hand side and combine them. You can take the k common, and you will get 1 plus 8 times mass of proton divided by mass of helium. All you need
So
to
that
remember,
will take.
all you need to remember is helium is just approximately 4 times the mass of the proton. So you can just put in four. Why is it just 4 times mass of the proton? Because helium just has like two neutrons and two protons. Mass of neutron and mass of proton हमने बता दिया is almost equal. So you can just put it as 4 mp, and just 1 by sorry 2 by, it's just 2, 8 by 4, which is just 2. Technically, what you will need to do is actually this mass of helium would be 4 times mass of the proton minus the binding energy, right? Ideally, you need to do that. And binding energy आपको actually दिया हुआ है. तो इसलिए actually it's better if you do that. You're given the binding energy. MPC square है ये. You can just take it to be 1 by 4 approximately. That's fine. It will be 1 by 4. So answer बचा बड़ी.
For MPC square, I
Hmm.
got 8,444.699.
8,000 how बचा? How MPC square 8,000? Why? What units are you using, bacha?
I okay, I did 1.0073 into
So you
C
took the
square.
1 point. No, no, no. You don't really need to do that, right? See, this is given to you already in AMU. This is in what units? Units हमको याद करना पड़ेगा, right? We need to remember the units. This is in AMU. If this is in AMU, you can just multiply it by 931.5, right? To just get it in MEV, which is
No, so I
essentially,
even converted it. I even converted into
you don't
MB.
really need to convert. Just do everything in MEV. Don't convert anything, because that will just that's just increasing your calculation and increasing the complexity, and hence just increasing the probability that you will commit a mistake.
Okay. Or else, if it's not converting into ME 1U, then it would be 9.0657
0657. What units are these?
into 10 raised to 16.
Into tens per
U
units.
U
You.
only. I guess, yeah.
How? How? This is just, see, MP is already given to be one U. This is just one proton, right? What you're doing, I think, is converting into kilograms, right? But 10 जो 16 नहीं आएगा भाई किलोग्राम में, -16 हो सकता है, 16 तो नहीं आएगा. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this clearly. Hmm, let's do this clearly. First, this is important. What can I remove? I can remove all of this, I think. This is also irrelevant. Um, okay. What about, okay, let's start one by one. MPC squared. MP, you're already given, let's not even consider the 0073, because since you're given that MP is approximately equal to MN, we'll just say both are just equal to one atomic mass unit. And one atomic mass unit we already know is just 931.5 mega electron volts, right? So we'll just write this whole thing as 931.5 mega electron volts. So everything will be in mega electron volt. Plus, what about the energy of lithium? Well, energy of the lithium whole nucleus, it's essentially going to be all the, see what is inside the lithium nucleus. Well, you have three protons, right? And how many neutrons? You have delta O as 3364. Four neutrons, right? So this is essentially how the nucleus looks like. So what is the total energy of this nucleus? Well, it's just going to be the individual energies. So if I'm saying that the mass of the neutron, mass of the proton is exactly the same, so how many total are there? Plus 7. So I'll just use 7 here, multiplied by the mass of the neutron, which is just 931.5. I'm converting everything into mega electron volts already, minus the total binding energy. What is the total binding energy? It's 5.6 into 7. Binding energy per nucleon multiplied by the total number of neutrons. Okay, this is the second term. Plus K, the third term, is equal to 2 times energy of the helium. What is helium made of now? Helium is made up of two protons, so two solid balls and two hollow triangles, which are the neutrons. So essentially, this is just 4 times 1. 1 is 931.5. This is 931.5 minus the binding energy. Binding energy is given to you to be 7 point something, right? 7.06. But that's per nucleon, so multiplied by 4. Okay, then what is remaining? What is remaining here is this whole thing here. So mass of proton divided by mass of helium. Well, let's just consider that to be 1 by 4, because it will be approximately be 1 by 4. Let's remove everything else, I think. So there's some space. Starting here, right? Plus, this is just 1 by 4. So I'm just going to write 1 by 4 here. So this is just 2, because 8 by 4 is just 2 multiplied by, and this whole thing is just K. So this is the 2 times K. That's it. There's a K here and there's a 2 times K here. So let's just take, just subtract both sides by K. So you will just remain, that's just only one K that is remaining. Uh, okay, now somebody needs to do all this calculation. 931.5 plus 7 into 931.5 minus 5.6 into 7. Please use a calculator. Then you'll have another minus sign here, minus 2 times 4 into 931.5 minus 7.06 into 4. This is 0.6 into 4. This should be equal to k. And that will be your final answer. Does this make sense, Jabana?
Yes, sir.
You understand what I'm doing? I'm just using everything in atomic mass unit and converting it into energy. How am I converting into energy? By remembering that one atomic mass unit is just 931.5 mega electron volts. This is conversion. Actually, this conversion is given in most question papers also, so you don't really need to remember it. But it's always a good tool to keep in your head. Similarly, there are other numbers also. So, for example, if you need mass of the electron, it's around zero point 0.5 electron volt from NeV, 0.5 NeV. Mass of the proton is essentially this, and mass of the neutron is also essentially this. So, what is the value of K?
1 minute, sir.
K. Come on, numbers. Tell me. Just use a calculator, no? Use your phone as a calculator. Calculator is the best. So you have 931.5 and you add bracket 7 multiplied by 931.5 and the bracket closes and then you have a minus bracket
So I got minus 10.96.
minus 10.96. So this is mega electron volts, right? I think it should be around that. 6 mega electron volts. Yeah, that does make sense. Let me just do it once. Not because I don't trust you, I trust your calculations immensely, but I want to check. It's always a good habit to check on your own what is happening. Minus, sorry, there's a plus sign there. And you have 7.8, 7.06 into 8. That close. Oh, I'm getting 17.28. Why is that? But close enough. So 17.28 million electron volts. That will be the kinetic energy of the initial kinetic energy of how do you say the hydrogen, the proton that is being bombarded. Lovely. Is this question absolutely clear? Jubena, are we sure?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Okay. If you see a question like this again in your life, ever, like even 20 years down the line, will you be able to solve it? No.
I'll try.
Nice. Yeah. Consider, consider and excited. Consider an excited hydrogen atom. Remember, this is an atom we're talking about. We're not really talking about the nucleus right now. This is the excited hydrogen atom in state n. It's in the state n, moving with the velocity v, with velocity v. So that v is really really small. It's smaller than the speed of light. This is important, but for reasons that I hope we'll talk about at some point. It emits a photon and it's traveling in the direction of its motion. Okay, so it's moving with velocity v along a direction, and then it suddenly emits a photon in the same direction as it's moving, and it changes its state, and it changes its state to a lower m orbit. Okay, so it just comes down to the m state. Find the frequency of find the frequency frequency of the emitted radiation. Emitted. Find the frequency of the emitted radiation. Just find it in terms of f naught, where f naught is the frequency emitted by a stationary uh, hydrogen atom excited. The stationary excited. So F naught is for the stationary version. Just write down what it's going to be in the moving version. Again, energy conservation, momentum conservation if you want. I don't think you need it, but sure. Go ahead.
So how to start it?
How to start it, lovely. So first, any question, draw the diagram. So what do you have? We have the hydrogen atom. So you have this atom here, hydrogen H11. It's in the nth state. So just write an n down, and it's moving with some velocity v. Let's say along this direction. What happens after some time is that it decays. So it's again moving at some velocity. Let's call it v prime, and it comes down to a state m such that it releases a radiation in this direction. So there's a gamma that is being released in in this direction. So what's the equation like? You have hydrogen in the star state, in the star n state. Let's call this n state. Hydrogen 1 1. It gives you. It goes into another star state, another metastable state, but still in a state which is the emit state plus gamma. Gamma that will be released will essentially be the releasing from from n to m, because of this n to m process that is going to be there. So let's try to use first energy conservation as we always do. Energetically, what is happening there? First of all, there is the rest mass energy of the hydrogen itself. Mm, okay, so that's just the mass of the proton, right? That's just the mass of the proton, because mass of the electron is going to be so tiny that it's going to have almost no bloody effect on the mass of the proton. So the rest mass energy is just mp c square plus it's moving, so kinetic energy half mp b squared. What else? Is there some other energy? Yes, no, maybe.
No.
It- there is some one another energy, right? Because what we know is that the atom is not in the ground state. It is in some higher excited state, and that state is the nth state, right? Just give me a second. I'll remove this, all of this, all of this, all of this, all of this. Yes. So it's essentially in this, let's call this state the nth state, and let's call this state the mth state. So it's in the nth state. What is the energy of the nth state? Let's call it En. Okay. What is the energy of the mth state? Let's call it En. Okay. Energy with the nth state and energy with the mth state. So this is, let's say it's En plus En. Okay, makes sense. So that's the left hand side. What about the right hand side? Well, you will again have the rest mass c square, that will be there, plus half mp v prime square, which is the new velocity that's moving at, plus em, because now it's in the mth state, and plus the energy of the photon, which will be h nu, right? So this is your energy conservation equation. Does this equation make sense to you?
Yeah, sir.
Have you missed out anything?
No.
So you do you see how essentially we're proceeding? We're essentially writing down everything that we know, literally doing that. Whatever we know, we're just noting that down and writing energy conservation equation for that, and not missing any terms. If you miss terms, obviously that equation will be wrong. So now we can see the MPC square just cancels out. That is lovely. What we need to, what do we not know here? How many variables are there? And how many equations are there? How many variables?
Two.
With what all? Very good. What all?
En and Em.
See, En, no, no, En to is given. En is given because it's given to you to be in the nth thing. Em is also given because it's also given. It's in the mth state. The states are given, so you don't really need to worry about that. You don't know the frequency, right?
Okay, sir.
That is one variable. This velocity you do know because it's given in the question, but this velocity you do not know. So this you do not know, and this you do not know. So you have two variables. And right now you only have one equation. Where do you get the other equation from? Any idea? Where do we get
No.
other equations from? Obviously, the first thing you need to try is momentum conservation, right? That's the first thing one tries. Let's try momentum conservation here. The first thing one should try. Sorry, not dash try, but should try. That will be mass of the proton times the velocity. That's the initial momentum total. On the right hand side, you'll have mass of the proton times v dash plus the momentum of the photon. How do you measure the momentum of the photon? It's h nu over c, right? You remember doing this in the previous chapter? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So that's how you write the momentum of the photon, h nu by c. So now you have two equations and two variables. Just substitute and solve. What are your two variable? This is your first equation, let's just say, and I'll write down your second equation as well. Half mpv squared plus en is equal to half mpv dash squared plus em plus h nu. This is the second equation. What are the two variables? Two variables are v prime and nu. V prime and nu. So we need to replace one of them, right, in order to calculate the other. Which one do we need to calculate? Nu is what we need to calculate. We need to calculate the frequency, right? So in order to calculate the frequency, we just remove v prime. How do we remove v prime? Just take v prime from equation 1 and substitute in equation 2. That's how you do it. There's one more thing that is given in the question. Okay, so since the time is almost up, uh, I'm leaving this question to you as a homework. There's one more step that is left in this question, which is essentially at the last line of the question, which essentially says he write the answer, write the frequency down in terms of f naught, which is the frequency of the En minus Em. So when it's stationary, the frequency f naught is just going to be En minus Em. So f naught is just given to you to be En minus Em over h. So जहाँ पे भी En minus Em दिखेगा, just replace that by f naught, and you will have the right answer. Okay, I think we should just stop here because it's time, and we shall continue next week. I think, huh?
Okay, sir. Okay.
Take care. We
Thank
still need to do some questions, so I think I'll take one more class next week.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Take care.